Hi, I'm Jason Latta. I've been at E3 for 3 years now, and I'm 18, so I'll be graduating, 2 weeks now, I guess, from now? So super close. I'm going to be presenting on the work that I did here at E3 and talking a little bit about the stuff that I do outside of E3 at Front Range, because that's one of the big reasons that's super awesome about this program. So like, hey, you want to go take college classes, we'll help you, which is really nice. Where is it? So the first project that I did this semester at E3 was this, which is right now what you're seeing is what I will see as a game developer behind the scenes working on it. And then if I click play, you can see it start running. I don't know, can you hear the, okay. So this was a Unity tutorial for how to build this because I had never used Unity before. And so the first step of using Unity is learn how to use Unity. And so it's just this, I don't know what you call it, but you walk around. Here, I'll turn off the music so you can hear me better. You walk around, we've got walls so you can't just like walk off the map and go off into the distance. Your goal is to eat food so that way you don't starve, get to the exit, and get through as many levels as possible without dying. And the standard game, because I made some modifications, the standard game only had this food bar, and so that's as you move, do actions, you get hungrier because exercising makes you hungry, and if you run out of food, you starve and start dying. I added in the HP because in the original version of it, it was just once you hit 0 health, you died, and if monsters attacked you, which you can't see in the first level, but if I go, I think it's the second or the third level. Yeah, you'll see that we have enemies in the game as well. So in the original, when they attack you, you just lose hunger, which I thought was kind of weird because, I don't know, I don't think being stabbed makes you hungry. I mean, it bleeds, it hurts, but I don't think it makes you hungry. So I add in health, and so instead of, here if I just do this in the background, so that way I can try and show you starvation. So in mine, when you run out of food, you start starving, which instead of killing you instantly makes you lose health, along with being attacked makes you lose health. And so instead of when you run out of food, you die, it's when you run out of health. If you pick up the food items, so you can see food, you're now starving, and when your HP or food changes, it'll tell you right there, so you can see that my HP is going down by 5, and I died. And it tells you how long you avoided death, how you died, which currently is either starvation or you got killed by a monster. And I had a point just a little bit ago, and I got distracted by this. I remember it. Alright, if you eat the food stuff, instead of just getting food, also gives you back a little bit of health, like 2 or 3, just because otherwise it would be a lot more difficult to win, because every time you got attacked, it would be permanent loss in health. And it's pretty much it right now. It's got music that doesn't play on the death screen, so that wasn't a good example. And it's also got some stuff for when you hit things. You can break the, if I start over again, you can break these. You'll see if I come over here, you'll hit once and it'll get damaged, and it'll go away after 3 swings. And that was in the original game. The only real change to those that I made was that I changed how I did the coding on the, they call it the back end, which is the part that the developer sees but the player doesn't. And that was just because it was something that I want to try out. It was a part of Unity coding called delegates that I hadn't seen in other languages before, and so I just wanted to try them out, and so I used them here to do a slightly different way. Not that, I don't know. So that was my first project. And if I go But for this one, I actually started as opposed to that one because it had an online tutorial for the standard setup. It had all of the images, all the sounds, and everything. It was just putting it all together and then adding on the little things. I didn't have to do any planning for that one. But for this one, I did. So I had two main stuff that I used for my two main files that I used for my planning. The first one that I started with was this Word document, which I just had to outline. Here I've got myself, I should probably start with what it actually is, which was for the gaming group I'm in, which meets every week. We were at one point thinking of doing a group project. That kind of fizzled, but I kept up with it just because I was interested in doing the part that I was going to work on it. And my part was, for the game that we were building, it was like a space shooter, like arcade, going back and forth, shooting the stuff as they come down type of game. And so in those games you have power-ups, and my job was to come up with a system for making it easy to keep track of what power-ups your ship had, get the data for them, save that to where the player was, stuff like that. And so to start, I wanted a system for storing the data about all the different power-ups. Just like in memory, how it would keep track of where they were. And so I came up with this, which was how I wanted the parts organized in like the memory. And so it was, you'd have your main folder, and then you'd have stuff like primary weapons, which would have subcategories, which would have their actual parts. And this was to help me keep in mind what kind of parts would be where, so I knew what data I was working with and what I could and couldn't do there, and where to go find stuff. And over here I just kind of came up with a basic kind of a template to have in mind of what a part would look like. Part being a power-up like lasers or shields or a bomb or whatever. So I could have a framework in my mind of what I was going to be working with, so I didn't have to keep constantly reinventing that. And then up here is just some stuff that I did that just kind of tells you what the different shapes of stuff mean, so that way if someone else looked at it, they might be able to understand it a bit better. So then coming back to this one, this was kind of like my main outline. We've got like what all the different parts need to work the way that I envisioned them working. Then down here we had where I had plans for what kind of actual coding projects I need to do to accomplish this. I've got, let's see, do I have over here? Yeah, so I had the biggest one was a window in the Unity editor, which you saw right at the very beginning, which was what I see that players don't. I wanted in there to have a menu that would pop up a window, and from within that window you could do all of the modifying of all the data for your power-ups. You could go modify a power-up, you can make a new one, you can make a new type of power-up, all that stuff. It'd handle it just from that UI instead of having to go in and do it yourself manually. It would cover some basic stuff that at least I've learned to call boilerplate, which is just the standard everything has in it. And it also makes sure that you didn't do stuff wrong for how it needs the data to be in order to function. And then that was one of the other parts, was I wanted in there to have a way to have it like you click a button in the menu for it and it would say, go make sure nothing's wrong with any of my parts. Go make sure that they're all working. The last bit that I wanted to do was an import-export feature, so that way if you built it in one game, you could export the files to another game, where you could import files from other people, stuff like that. Now, unfortunately, I didn't actually get a lot of actual coding done because I spent a bit too long on the planning, but I've got the last part that I planned, and I did get to, was this, which was a mock-up that I wanted for the main UI for the creating and modifying of parts. We've got the standard, since you're navigating around folders, we've got a back folder, or a back button, creating folders, creating parts, navigation window, and a modification window. Navigation window lets you go around the folders, select parts, move around in the file system. And this one was for once you found a part to modify its data. And so what that ends up looking like currently is, look, I don't know if you can see it, but right up there I've got a menu item called Custom Items Tool. And I put this in, it's got all the buttons that I want for the stuff that my tool would do. We've got the creator menu, verifying, importing, and exporting. Currently they don't work yet. I think some of them have, like, they say that you click the export button, but they don't actually do anything yet. So this, let's see, I think I can make it bigger. Yeah, that's the creator window. So you can see up here we've got the back button, create folder, create part. You haven't selected a part, so it doesn't tell you what the part's name is, and then where you are in the folders. And I just have it filled up with generic test : blank to make sure that it would actually store strings and stuff. And if you verify, minimize it, make it smaller, you can see that I actually got it to work so that way you can scroll. If the list is too big to be seen, you can scroll and look at them. So that's kind of where I'm at with this one. And so I've still got to get the buttons working, get the actual creation of parts going, but that's where I'm at. And then just close off these. The biggest thing for me that was why I really like doing this project was because it's a whole bunch of stuff in Unity that they don't actually have a lot on. So it was interesting to go look around the Unity website, look through the documentation, find out how to do this stuff. Because all of that GUI work uses a completely, GUI being graphical user interface, or just stuff that the user manipulates and looks at. So anything that is on a tech device that you see manipulate as a user is pretty much a GUI of some form. And so that kind of GUI is a completely different, you have to do it completely differently than the GUI that you saw in the original project of the game, like where it said day 1 or day 2 or whatever. It's actually a different way of doing it, and there you're using a Unity specific, like they've got a framework for it for in-game GUIs, but for the GUIs in the actual editor itself, you have to use a different thing, like a different set of functions, different methods, different format. And so it's interesting to go find that, find out how you actually manipulate files in Unity, because that's not something that I'd seen before. Like, how would you create a folder to put parts in? And so I think, I don't know, I've always been the kind of person that likes to go see what stuff you can do with something. And it's not like it hasn't been done, it just isn't the most common use of Unity. I guess I should probably talk about, because I mentioned at the beginning that I'm also doing college classes along with this. So this is what I do while I'm here at E3, is I do this, or I do schoolwork if I'm really swamped and need the time for it. Except I'm taking classes at Front Range concurrently with this, which is one of the big advantages of E3, as I said, is that they'll pay for college classes at Front Range, which is nice because money is not cheap. And so this semester I'm taking discrete mathematics, philosophy, and physics. So physics, I think probably most people know what physics and philosophy are, but discrete mathematics is stuff like set theory, logic, algorithms, graphs, trees. It's a whole bunch of structure stuff, discrete structures, using discrete things as opposed to continuous. So it's not dealing with, we don't use a lot of real numbers, which is like 1/3, stuff like that is like 1s, 2s, 3s, integers, so it's discrete as opposed to, and if you take a number line, it's discrete if you can draw tick marks, it's continuous if you can't, it's just a spectrum. Like a slider is continuous, but a pick and choose is discrete. So it's a whole bunch of structures dealing with discrete data, which is really useful as a computer science person because not a lot are you using continuous data, at least in my experience. Most stuff that is continuous is at some level discrete, just because computers can't do million, billion, jillion decimal places. and still run the same way.
So you mentioned you're a senior.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk a little bit about your next steps?
Next step as a senior, first step is to pass my physics final, and that's on Friday, so that'll be fun. And then after that, I am actually heading to Iowa go to a private school there called Morningside.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I'm from Iowa.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to go there. A, because, as I mentioned, I'm taking philosophy class, and so I've got some leanings towards wanting to look at philosophy or psychology as possible secondary majors. And so liberal arts kind of college is more geared towards that, along with the computer science. But the biggest thing for me is just how nice and small it is, like Front Range, where I feel like I'll really find a community, as opposed to, like, my other option that I was thinking of was CSU, and I saw myself being too easily lost in the crowd and not finding people, falling into just sticking with my old friends here, whereas if I went off to Iowa, I'd actually make new friends, get myself out there, get new experiences.
Morningside was tickled to get you, right?
Oh,
Can
yeah,
you explain how tickled they were?
Gave me a full-ride scholarship that's not concurrent on GPA, which is really nice as someone who wants to dabble in some other areas that I'm not as good at as computer science.
So Jason, you've been homeschooled the bulk of your educational career, correct?
Yeah, starting 3rd grade.
Okay. So do you think that combination of homeschool and then this personalized learning has made you completely ready for college? Are you ready for that step?
Yeah.
And what is about the personalized learning piece that has helped you the most?
I mean, I think part of it was just, like, with E3, it's like, they're like, here, go do this. And you're expected to go do it. And it's not like what I hear about people in high school where it's just like, it's less involved with me, like the teachers are less involved with me. It's more up to me to manage myself, which I feel like is what it's going to be in college.
Questions, comments for Jason? Dr. Kubik?
Yes, I did have one. I just want to see where it was. So I enjoyed in your presentation, Jason, where you were talking about wrestling with the planning structure rather than actually doing some of the execution. When you were showing the diagram, you really went out to a really deep level of detail during that planning thing that was maybe worth it compared to getting some execution done. What do you think was a major learning that came out of really going more deeper into the planning rather than getting a bunch of the execution done on that? It was when you were dealing with the power-up diagrams. It was that part, right? Like, you spent a lot of time really digging in and thinking about conceptually how to plan it. What do you think is the value of doing all that extra work, even if you don't have a final product to show for it?
And the biggest thing that drew why I chose that and why I think it's valuable is because the type of program that I'm building is called a systems program, which means it's not high execution based. It's not like building an RPG where people play the game. You're building something to help people build other things. It's like making a drill instead of a piece of furniture. If the drill's off, every piece of furniture that the drill is used to make, all the screws are going to be off, everything's going to have problems. So I think